So, what began as an immigration raid has become a national crisis. On May 28th, in a tense meeting last week, Trump aide Stephen Miller and Homeland Security Kristi Noem demanded that immigration agents seek to arrest 3,000 people a day. Miller also reportedly told agents to stop focusing on undocumented immigrants who are engaged in crimes and arrest any and all undocumented immigrants. He suggested targeting Home Depots. On January 6th, ICE agents conducted aggressive sweeps in downtown Los Angeles, dragging people from workplaces and sparking immediate protests. By that evening, crowds had gathered outside the federal building, clashing with police. On June 7th, the next day, protests spread to Compton and Paramount amid rumors of more raids, even as Mayor Karen Bass insisted there were none. That night, President Trump signed a memo deploying 2,000 National Guard troops. By June 8th, they were on the streets without Governor Gavin Newsom's consent. Newsom called it, quote, a serious breach of state sovereignty and later warned, quote, democracy is under assault before our eyes. Meanwhile, Trump accused protesters of being paid insurrectionists and said it would be great if ICE arrested Newsom. On June 9th, 700 Marines were also deployed to Los Angeles by the orders of President Donald Trump. By June 10th, just yesterday, protests had erupted across the nation. And today, June 11th, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, unlike Governor Newsom, appeared to back Trump's play, ordering his own guard deployment. Critics argue this was never about public safety, but about consolidating federal power, manufacturing chaos, and justifying authoritarian control. Let's unpack what's happening and what it means for the future of democracy in America. And to do that, I am joined by one of my favorite people, Caroline Luce, labor historian at University of California, Los Angeles. Carolyn, how you doing?
I'm okay, hanging in there. How are you?
Not too bad. It's always a pleasure to see you. And I want to have you on today because for the many of us who have not been in Los Angeles for the last week, give us some sense of what it's like from your perspective. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Um, well, I will say I was not here over the weekend, but was receiving frantic calls. I do some work with the Garment Workers Center and the arrest of David Huerta, the leader of SEIU of California, sort of pinged as I was out of town for the weekend. But David has fortunately been released. He is being charged with absolutely bonkers federal felony charges. But he was defending a garment shop. And I think that one of the reasons you're seeing such emotion right now in Southern California is the locations that ICE is choosing to conduct its raids. Worksite raids are very familiar to many Angelenos. There was a time in the battle days of the 70s and 80s where the LAPD cooperated with what was then known as the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, on worksite raids and used to brag that 25% of their felony arrests were for unauthorized entry. And it took years of community activism to sever that relationship and to create a real sanctuary that we enjoy today in Los Angeles. Going after work sites, one of the attempts was to enter an elementary or a middle school graduation. These are, places where real workers, regular folks are just trying to go about their day and have a semblance of a normal life. And that's where he's choosing to wield state power right now. So many of us are shocked and outraged that they're picking on the most vulnerable members of our community, day laborers, car wash workers. There were 5 car washes raided yesterday, garment workers. It's just appalling. And so I think you're seeing a lot of emotion right now, particularly from young folks, folks whose family members are vulnerable, folks whose parents, relatives, and communities are really, really vulnerable, and they're pushing back. I will say that having been down there on Monday, these are not the biggest actions that we've seen in Los Angeles in this grand scheme of things. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, SEIU workers from across, there were like 45,000 SEIU workers marching in downtown. These are not even close. And so I think that sort of discordance is part of what we're reacting to as well, is the overreaction. I mean, the LAPD always overreacts, but the overreaction in this case is so extreme because we're not even talking about very large in the grand scheme of things rallies and actions. Many of us have seen actions two, three, four, five, 10 times the size of what we're seeing right now, and yet the response is more severe than anything that I've witnessed in my almost 20 years living in LA. It's the disconnect is really appalling and scary.
I want to get into that disconnect because that's one of the things I want to talk to you about was some of the media narratives I think a lot of folks outside of Los Angeles are getting. But something you said there that I think bears repeating or emphasizing is the whole critique from the right about undocumented immigrants as they supposedly come here as criminals and take social services and don't work. But as you point out, they're raiding places of employment and schools. These are folks who are trying to work. They are contributing to the economy. They are getting an education. Those are the ones being targeted. But so switching to this news media narrative, I wonder what you've made of the news media coverage, because to me, they seem to have made the events in Los Angeles an issue about whether or not Trump can send Marines or National Guard to California without Governor Newsom's approval. And that is a big question, and I understand the importance of it. But I think they keep taking for granted Trump's argument. Trump is basically saying like there was so much violence in Los Angeles, and Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass were not addressing it, so I had no choice but to send in the National Guard. I haven't seen the evidence to justify that conclusion or prove that. I wonder what you've seen or what you make of that.
I mean, the way that graffiti is being dressed up as violence, there's a lot of graffiti. Okay. I don't consider that violence personally. It's not even really property destruction. It's quite literally just graffiti. That is not violent as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that's violent in the eyes of the mayor. I don't think it's violent in the eyes of the LAPD, frankly. Um, there's a difference between violating an order to disperse, violating a curfew, as was imposed last night on our city, and a few folks around the edges of a protest spray painting the walls of federal buildings. I understand that visually that looks impactful for people, I suppose. But this is a very small part of a very 249 square miles. This is an enormous city. And the idea that some graffiti in a very, very small part of town is enough to warrant, I mean, I gotta be honest, these ice guys act so tough. They brandish weapons, they cover their faces, they don't have badges, they don't have collars, they attack people, they disappear them off the street, and yet they're somehow vulnerable to teenagers graffitiing. Like somehow they need military protection because these big tough guys are so at risk. I mean, it honestly makes no sense. And I'm happy to talk about this with you, Nolan, because I was describing to a friend last night. I think they're high on their own supply. I think the propaganda has like genuinely shaped their brains in ways that they don't even consciously realize. I mean, honestly, I was down on Monday with faith leaders. Yesterday, they arrested a priest. I mean, these are not dangerous radical criminals. Yes, there are some ne'er-do-wells, as there are with every protest, who are there to wreck shit and to be super rebellious and super defiant and climb on top of the bus cover and wave a flag and all that kind of stuff, take a freeway. But again, these are not unprecedented things for most Angelenos. I mean, I've been thinking so much. It is the 5-year anniversary of the George Floyd uprising. The scale and scope and magnitude of that uprising, this pales in comparison. And I don't say that to diminish the bravery of the activists who are out there putting their bodies on the line in the street. I just say that to sort of calm us all down because it feels to me like the right is fighting a battle of 5 years ago. They're acting out on this paranoid version of the world that they've created for themselves really since that uprising began, um, and trying to sort of win that fight react in the way they wanted to 5 years ago now, when the reality on the ground is just not the same. I will say resistance is also taking a whole bunch of other forms. LA has one of the most robust mutual aid networks in the country, one of the most robust sort of immigrant defense networks in the country. There are rapid response teams. I mean, that's why David Huerta was arrested. Um, I don't believe for a second that they knew who they were arresting. I think they saw a brown man interfering with their ability to destroy the lives of 14 garment workers, and they said, all right, he's got to go too. The danger right now is they seem to be doubling, tripling, quadrupling down instead of de-escalating, which is what we hope for from our national leaders, is that cooler heads will prevail. Um, I I know that's what the mayor and the governor are saying. They're not necessarily doing that because like every law enforcement agency in the state is in town and there are thousands of LAPD officers as well. But the general theme that this is not so big that we can't handle it ourselves is absolutely true. The LAPD does a plenty good job of brutalizing protesters on their own. They just don't need this support. And it just all just feels very, very odd. Um, this is a city of 4 million people, a county of 10 million people. As many as a third of those folks are foreign born. We are a city of immigrants. We love our immigrant communities. We believe they add vitality and strength to our communities. And I don't think, I mean, there's probably folks in Los Angeles who are sort of rooting for this, but I don't think anyone wants this kind of disruption, right? The freeways have been shut down only once by the protesters. More often, it's by law enforcement. They are the ones shutting down the freeways. They are the ones causing traffic. CHP left their cars on the freeway. So, hours after the protesters had cleared out, there were cars blocking traffic for hours beyond the length of that protest. So, I think, first of all, you can't, I mean, I'm in Westwood. You would have no idea it's anything is happening. So much of the city is totally calm and unimpacted by this. But I think all of us are, if I can speak for my fellow Angelinos, a little bit baffled by the extremity of this reaction, given that we do this all the time. I mean, again, there are protests all the time. It seems bizarre to me, actually.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think at some level or maybe the entire level, a lot of this is just political theater. And recently I was reading Tim Miller's book Why We Did It, and Tim Miller was a former Republican
Yeah.
operative dating back to the George W. Bush days.
Bulwark guy, right?
Say it again.
A bulwark guy.
Yeah, yeah. And he was saying that he explained how over the last few decades they would purposely play up fear mongering around a range of issues, including immigration, to really get people to support policies they otherwise wouldn't support. And he said what they didn't anticipate was eventually you'd condition voters to legitimize those fears and want a politician who delivers on them. In walks Donald Trump, and I think that explains a lot of the political theater here because we see like yes, there are some acts of violence. We saw the Waymo cars on fire, and we saw closing of the freeways, disruptions, but the media tends to cover those are more sensational. They get more eyeballs than people standing there peaceful chanting for peace or human rights. And like also the Mexican flag, right? I know that one
Yeah.
really gets under the skin of a lot of Americans to see that Mexican flag waving. Ironically, they weren't as concerned when there was an Israeli or Ukrainian flag over the last 5 years waving. But that kind of political theater, I think, conditions a lot of audiences to have a different interpretation of Los Angeles. And that's why I wanted to have you on here. But I think another component of that, and tell me what you think, the Trump administration promised to deport 12 million people who are supposedly undocumented. I think we all knew that was, a near impossibility. The people they have deported so far includes people who have a legal right to be here and U.S. citizens, but without due process, these folks can't prove they have a legal right to be here. That's what's really frustrating so many people about this process. So in response, now as the public is realizing they're not going to deliver on that 12 million goal, they're trying to increase these arrests on any and everyone to get the perception of progress, even though there's no real deliverable. Is that kind of what your take is, as someone who monitors kind of politics and what's going on the ground in Los Angeles?
I have kind of a couple of responses to that. I mean, per your point about the flags, I think, I mean, first of all, I could not give a shit about the flags. But I do think that that is kind of what I mean about LA being an immigrant city is that these are sort of very normal things to see. You see Mexican flags at Dodgers events when the Lakers win the world championship and thousands of people gather downtown. There are Mexican flags. There are Iranian flags. There are all kinds of flags, Salvadoran flags, Honduran flags. we embrace diaspora. This is a diasporic city. We recognize that people can hold multiple identities. It also was Mexico. Let's keep that in mind, right? Our city's flag is orange, green, and yellow and bears the remnants of our ties to Mexico historically. We feel very close. I talk about LA as a borderland, even though we're not quite technically in the border zone. So I don't think folks here are bothered by that by any way, shape, or form. And I take your point about flags of other nations that we're sort of embracing. Um, what I do want to say, and I know we talked about this last time I was on your podcast, is the connection here between labor rights and immigrant rights. So I mentioned garment workers. A few years back, 2021, we helped to pass SB 62, which is the strongest protections for garment workers and their rights in the country. It should be a national standard. If you want interested, the Fabric Act is in Congress right now. They haven't moved on it. They're trying to make it a national standard. It did things like abolish the piece rate, which is one of the reasons that garment workers are susceptible to wage theft. You're paid by the piece, not by the hour. It's supposed to add up, and it very rarely does. It established joint liability for garment manufacturers so that in their supply chain, if there's bad actions in their supply chain, they can be held accountable. It is not surprising then that they choose to target a garment shop because when you have a largely undocumented workforce, that is a chilling effect. People are not going to pursue their rights under SB 62. Similarly, car wash workers in Los Angeles have their own worker center. It's called the Clean Car Wash. They've launched a massive campaign. They run a cooperative, a worker-owned cooperative. So they go after car wash workers. We are one of many cities that has the presence of day labor networks in the city. Endelon, my dear friend Chris Newman, who's actually been helping support the Abrego Garcia case. Endelon is wonderful and empowers folks looking for work on the corner to know their rights to negotiate employment. So you target folks working on the corner, right? All of this is about forcing people back into the shadows. That 12 million number you reference will be impossible in terms of the current state of the immigration deportation infrastructure. Geo Group is chomping at the bit to expand that out. Every one of the people that these private detention facilities house, they charge a fee as though they were staying in a hotel. It used to be $200. I don't know that that's still true. Don't fact check me, but they are taking profit from every day that someone is needlessly thrown into a detention center, citizens thrown into a detention center. Every day of that inconvenience, GEO Group profits. So to me, this kind of behavior is not actually intended to achieve those numbers. It's intended to scare people, to force them into the shadows. And you can feel this in our communities in Los Angeles right now. We're a city that has street vendors everywhere, in some informal street markets where street vendors tend to congregate. None of those folks are on the street. That guy you see on your corner who sells fruit and juice on the weekends, they're inside. They're hidden right now. I ride the bus every day to work, often with a lot of domestic workers who are coming from communities in South and East LA to work in the affluent neighborhoods of West Side. The bus was half full today because people are too afraid to go to work. So one thing I've been calling on my friends and neighbors to do, us white folks who are citizens who have this kind of protection, is to protect those people in their lives. Don't make your laundry guy or your yard guy come this week, but pay him anyway. Don't make your domestic worker come to your house this week, but pay her anyway, right? These are the things that we can do to let people seek the safety and shelter that they want to. And of course, if you have the means to, please contribute to these organizations and their legal support funds. The Garment Worker Center is running a fundraiser for the 14 garment workers that were detained. Clean Car Wash is running a fundraiser for those folks. This kind of infrastructure is here in Los Angeles. And so, of course, they're attacking us. What I am also concerned about, and a lot of us are mindful of, is the fact that we have this robust infrastructure here. They don't in the Central Valley. They don't in further flung communities. They don't necessarily have that kind of mutual aid and support. And those are the folks that are being disappeared without a hint, without a noise, right? It's really important that we get loud and we try to stand in the way of these things as best we can, slow them down, if nothing else, so that their families know where they are. No one knows where a lot of these people are. They've kidnapped 145 people by best estimates. Some of them have been already deported. Some of them we don't know where they are. That is shocking to the soul. And I do hope, I guess I'll say, that even Americans who voted for this proudly, I mean, we do see these headlines periodically of like, I voted for Trump, but not for him to deport my friend Mary from my small town. I can only hope that this kind of overreach will backfire for this administration. My concern is that thousands of people are going to be hurt before that reaction kicks in. There is so much damage to be done, and it's moving so quickly. And I'm glad to see articles like, that woman who worked at, I think it was a Waffle House,
Hmm.
and her community was like, "How dare you? She's out." Great. That community will probably be forever changed in terms of how they talk about this stuff. But for that to happen in communities across the country, that means thousands and thousands of people have to be hurt. And so I think what you're seeing is Los Angeles's sense of leadership, that we have this power here that we've built together. We have an incredibly robust labor movement. LA is a union town, which is a crazy thing to say as a labor historian, given its history. Um, we have a robust mutual aid network. We have a robust worker center network. All of these resources make us well equipped to stand up and fight back right now. And it's really, really heartening to see the way that that activism is spreading into other cities right now. I'm sorry to say that those cities are now also getting National Guard sent their direction. That was not the goal, but if not now, when, kind of thing.
Good. Yeah, and I'll get some of the links from you from some of those organizations, and they'll be down in the comments for folks who want to donate there. Caroline, I have one more question for you. So this is all happening as Trump plans a military parade for his birthday on June
Yes.
14th.
Oh, oh.
And many people, even centrists like Bill Maher, who've become what they've become, they are uncomfortable with seeing military in the streets. And in fact, I was even talking to a very old conservative who immigrated here after World War II, and he's a in the tank Trump voter. And he said the only thing that makes him uncomfortable is the idea of military in the streets, which we're seeing in Los Angeles as well. And at the same time, Governor Newsom, I think, spoke to this. He warned the nation that California is just, in Newsom's opinion, first in line, and this type of authoritarianism and destruction of due process and human and civil rights is going to overtake the nation at Trump's hand. You're someone who's studied this history. I see that this, for folks who are just listening, the Stop Fascism poster behind you there on the wall. I don't know. What do you make? I think some people say this is more of the kind of Trump derangement syndrome where people are freaking out and overreacting to Trump. But someone like yourself who studied the history, especially of these issues, what do you make of it?
Um, I will say that I do think the cost of all of this is worth discussing with your centrist friends and family members. It allegedly is going to cost $134 million to send these Marines to Los Angeles. Completely, they are unneeded and unwanted, and yet they're spending $134 million of taxpayer dollars to send them there. Um, I think that DHS is a rogue agency at this point. It's not abiding by its budget. It's massively overspending. And of course, this is all coming at the very same moment where they're robbing vital social service programs of funds. They're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Peter is help and support. Paul is violence and brutality. So these things are certainly connected. I think when we think about the context of fascism. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that word. I think Trump has incredible fascist tendencies, if not fascist realities. You know, it took the Nazis less than 100 days to transform Germany from a thriving democracy into a fascist state. And the throttling that we're feeling right now, this sort of bewildering sense of onslaught of every day. I mean, I remember getting home last night and I hadn't even heard about like RFK getting rid of vaccines. I was like, oh my God, wait, what? Also that. It's really hard to take this all in. And I don't begrudge anyone who finds it so overwhelming that they just want to tune off and walk away. But I do think that this is a really important window. Some of the damage that's being done here cannot be undone and will not be undone. You and I both work at universities where we're watching folks who've dedicated their lives to the production and creation of knowledge for the benefit of mankind, scientists, librarians, people who are just having that money taken away and whose careers will probably be ended by this administration's, the doge of it all, I guess is what I would say. So I don't ever want to give these folks credit, nor honestly do Nazis get any credit. They're not particularly smart. They're not particularly talented. They're not particularly strong personalities, incredibly thin-skinned, petty people. The problem is that even a dummy can do really, really bad damage. Even people who don't know what they're doing, maybe even because they don't know what they're doing, they do really, really bad damage. So I think in some ways, at least this is what I'm feeling, and I know some of my students are feeling, is like, if we don't get on this now, if we don't make a stand now, who's to stop these folks from doing whatever they want, frankly? And there is much discussion of Gavin and his tough talk and his, taking the center stage and his bloviating. And yes, he's being self-serving, and yes, he wants to be president. All of that might be true, but we have to do this stuff. We have to oppose this. We have to file lawsuits. We have to talk tough. We have to get these military people out of our city. We have to get them to stop violating our sovereignty as a state. One of the things I do share with Gavin, and I think with you, is a bit of California pride in that way. We are the 5th largest world economy. We're a donor state to the federal government. We pay more money in taxes than we get back. And to have them come and undermine the federalism ostensibly and take our resources. I grew up right near the Presidio in San Francisco, which is a self-sustaining, public-private partnership. It makes money. They want that, and they're going to take it, and they're going to mess with the Presidio, which is a jewel of San Francisco civic culture these days, or has become a jewel of San Francisco civic culture. So I encourage people, however bewildered, however overwhelmed, however scared you might feel right now, to find a little corner of the fight right now and claim it and make it yours. Maybe that's donating to other people. Maybe that's showing up at a meeting. Maybe that's an anti-Musk protest. Maybe that's the 50-51 groups that are popping up all over the place. Find a buddy, go to an action, do whatever feels safe within your limits. Not everyone needs to take a freeway. Not everyone needs to graffiti. You don't have to do any of that. But make your voice heard now, because I fear that it's going to be too late if we just wait for when people stop getting their Social Security checks, people get notifications that they're bounced off Medicare. I know it's easy to tune out. It's really overwhelming. You got to protect yourself. Don't get sucked into the void. I do think that the hysteria is operating on the left as well. I think that's one of the challenges we're facing in Los Angeles. There are rumors of ICE being everywhere all the time, and it's all about sort of getting good information to the folks on the ground rather than promoting hysteria. So don't work yourself into a frenzy, but I find this getting involved to be the only way to calm down. Being around other people will make you feel better. Showing up at a meeting, showing up at an action, it's going to make you feel better to know that you're not alone in feeling this sense of outrage right now. And that's true whether you live in a big city like Los Angeles, big blue city, or whether you live in a small rural community. Find the people in your area that you can feel that sense of community and trust with, build those networks, and keep each other safe,
Well said. Caroline Luce, thank you so much for being on the Disinfo Detox. We'll certainly check back in. Hang in there.
All right. See you soon.
Hey, Detoxers. Thanks for tuning in. You can find Disinfo Detox on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Every click helps grow the community and keeps those tech overlords happy. Detox complete.